All right, well, welcome everybody. This is exciting to be here talking to all of you. At last count, we had over 210 registrants for this. It's a hot topic these days. It's you see commercials about it on on the news. You see more and more counties are starting to take action against title theft, and just by a twist of fate. I have developed my expertise in this field. So let me go ahead and get started. And I think all of you will gain some new information out of this presentation. There are lots of different people on the line right now. There are notaries, there are lawyers, there are people in the title industry, there are people from county recorder's office and county clerk, law enforcement online. So I've tried to provide something for everybody. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Start my timer. All righty, so the first thing I want to tell you is that home title theft is real. It's not something that was made up on Madison Avenue. It is a real problem that homeowners are facing. And the reason I know this is because I have represented more victims of home title theft than any other attorney. I put a little asterisk next to that because, frankly, there's no way for me to verify that. But I've been doing this since 2003, and I know the people involved in this fight nationwide, and people come and go, and I'm the only one that I know of that has had the staying power for coming up on 20 years here. So I started out as a real estate fraud prosecutor in the LA District Attorney's Office. And with most of those cases involved title fraud and title theft. As I said, my first case was back in 2003. In 2007, I even wrote some legislation trying to stop title theft. And back then I didn't see the whole picture yet, and I kind of nibbled at the edges, but it was somewhat effective and got passed into law. I still teach California detectives, fraud detectives, how to investigate real estate crimes. I'm part of a faculty that does that here in California. And lastly, I am the co-chair of the Mortgage Fraud Task Force, the International Association of Financial Crimes Investigators. So I've been doing this for a long time, this particular subject matter for a long time. I've handled a lot of title theft cases over the years. So basically, what is title theft? I mean, it's identity theft. It's not a new crime in that sense. It's identity theft that we all know about. And so, to commit this crime, they have to steal a property owner's identity and forge their name on a deed. They have to steal a notary's identity, typically, and forge their name and stamp on a deed. So think about it in terms of a type of identity theft. And underlying title theft is identity theft, forgery, filing false documents, and in many, many cases, mortgage fraud as well. So from that perspective, it's not a new crime. But in a moment, I'll talk to you about how it is a new crime if you look at it in a different way. I just want to tell you briefly about some recent cases that have come across my desk. This was in February of this year. So that's about 4 or 5 months ago, I got a call from an elderly woman who had lived in her house for 25 years. And she had been evicted recently. She was evicted after a bad guy had forged foreclosure documents. So it made it look like there was a sheriff's auction of her house, and that the bad guy now had control of her house, now owned her house. That's what it looked like with this forged deed. And then with that forged deed in hand, the bad guy then went into court and filed what's called an unlawful detainer lawsuit. That's an eviction lawsuit in California, and had her evicted from her very own house. Now, I'm not practicing law right now, so I referred her to some other attorneys, but they're going to have a huge job ahead of them digging out of this hole that she's in, because the first thing they have to deal with is the eviction, and then only then can they deal with the forged foreclosure documents as well. And people are not likely to believe that the foreclosure documents were forged. People just don't believe that. They don't want to believe it's possible, but it is. And this was a house that had a reverse mortgage on it, and those foreclosure documents made it look like that mortgage was completely wiped out. Similarly, last week I spoke with somebody from a very large title company, an executive of a large title company in this country, one of the big title insurers, and they are currently dealing with what they described as an epidemic of title theft in Hawaii, of all places, involving vacant land. The vacant land is often owned by people who don't live in Hawaii, and so they're not paying attention on a daily basis. And people using a remote online notarization. It's the new trend in notarization, remote online notarization. They were able to pose as these property owners and take control of those properties and sell them to unsuspecting buyers. And they ran off with the money before anybody knew what was going on. The second thing I want to say is that home title theft is easy. You might already be getting that picture when I talk about these cases. So let me give you just a couple of more examples. I'm sorry, PJ, I see that you say the echo is killing you. I'm not sure what to do about that. So, all right, so this is a case out of Miami, Florida. Not my case. I heard about it on the news and then looked into it. An elderly woman held a piece of land in I guess a pretty nice area of Miami. The land had been in her family for generations. And one day she found out that it had been stolen out from under her, but with this forged deed. Her signature there, says Shirley Gibson, was forged. The notary's signature and stamp were forged as well. Interestingly, when this went on the news, according to the police chief, who I saw on a news show, I don't know him personally. Okay, sorry. The chat distracted me a little bit. But the police chief said that as a result of the publicity, they had 50 other reports of title theft in Miami-Dade as a result of the publicity, as they said. So that's interesting. Speaking of which, I don't know if you can see what I'm holding in the picture here. This is a fake notary stamp. It's very easy to get a hold of fake notary stamps online. I paid literally $14 for this thing. Now mine says, as you can see, Joe Q Fraudster. It says fake on it, and everything else is made to look like it's fake, but it didn't have to be. I could have purchased this in the name of any notary anywhere. I could have used any notary's name and their commission number and put a seal on there, and it would have looked legitimate, and anybody would have used it. Would have accepted it as a legitimate stamp on a document. So it's a very easy process to steal, to commit deed fraud and to steal title. I want to give you a couple of examples here from some local news shows.
Now to a Local 10 News investigation. A South Florida woman is fighting to get back her property that was stolen out from under her and resold.
And now that property is the center of a criminal investigation. Local 10's Terrell Forney is joining us now with an update. Terrell.
And as you're about to see, this type of crime leaves a long trail of victims who are not just taken for their money, but their pride and reputation too. This is the property deed now at the center of a criminal investigation by police, all tied to lucrative land in Coconut Grove that was secretly sold from underneath its rightful owner, 86-year-old Shirley Gibson.
That someone had forged my name.
A second property Ms. Gibson owns had been listed for sale until the deal fell through on closing day.
The first red flag, initially the gentleman told me not to put a sign on the lot.
The realtor who listed the property says the mail crook posed as Miss Gibson.
His name is Shirley Gibson. He had an ID.
He had an ID that said Shirley Gibson?
Oh, yes. Yes. For us to list the property as real estate agents, we need to have a full listing agreement, and we also need to have the proper identification of that person. He provided both things, and it all checked out with property records and everything.
It's unclear if the mystery man who only worked by phone is tied to the sale that did go through at Gibson's first property, purchased by a shell corporation out of New York. But the licensed notary whose name and official stamp appears on that transaction says he's a victim too.
I've never heard of Mrs. Gibson. I've never heard of any of the witnesses on the case.
Mohammed Shribe, an affordable housing developer who says he does not do work in Coconut Grove, showed us his real stamp with an eagle, absent from the image on the fraudulent document.
The signature is not mine. My handwriting is not it. The stamp that is used is not mine.
So, I mean, there's that case of a forged notary stamp. It's much easier than people realize to do that. And there was also apparently a forged or fake driver's license used in this case, which can be gotten online. I mean, they can get fake licenses or fake identity cards that are so good you can't tell what they are by the naked eye. Now, so this one was in Florida, but I kind of collect these videos as they pop up online. I've got videos from California, many from California, from Philadelphia, from New Jersey, New York, Miami, Florida, multiple in Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. I got them from all over the country. This is not unique to one area in the country. I'll show you one more video. The sound is a little bit weird on this next video.
Your grandfather lived here, he worked here.
Yes.
For Curtis Simmons, that family history is why this dilapidated house on South 20th Street is so important, passed down from his grandfather. Until late last year, Simmons discovered he no longer owned the home.
It's stunning. It's the only way to say it.
Simmons says in December he was finally ready to sell the property for $400,000. The city records clerk showed him this sales agreement and had already transferred the deed to a property investor for $150,000. The paperwork had been notarized and filed 3 weeks earlier. Simmons says he received none of the money. Someone else signed his name.
It's nothing like my signature. As soon as I saw it,
So this is a forgery.
it's a forgery. It's clearly a forgery.
Okay. All right. So why do they do this? They do it because home title theft is lucrative. In fact, I'd say this is the easiest crime for a single person, a single operator, a single fraudster to commit without the help of others and to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. So let's just talk about how much they can steal. One of the things they do is they use hard money as a way to steal the money, as a way to steal money. Excuse me, fast money, because they'll sell the money to an investor. What they'll often do is once they get control of the property, they'll sell it for maybe 65 cents on the dollar. An investor comes in thinking, oh, this is a great deal. This is a perfect flipping opportunity. And they buy it quickly for either for cash of their own cash, by borrowing some hard money from investors, that type of thing. And as I mentioned, it's often a lone person who can do this by themselves, sitting in their own house and doing it. All right. All right. So here's an example of a case in the Los Angeles area. That was where the house was worth approximately $1.4 million. It was sold to a flipping company who thought they were getting a great deal at approximately $650,000. The true owner had no idea this was happening until after the fact. But you can see how easily they can make a lot of money, $650,000, and then they were in the wind before anybody knew what it was happening. In fact, the true owner didn't know about this until the neighbor called and said, "Hey, I see you're finally fixing up the house." And the true owner was not doing it. So, but the bad guys got away with a lot of money in this case. The same bad guys did another house in Santa Monica, California, where the estimated property value was $3.7 million, which they then sold to a developer for cash, for $1.4 million of the cash, and were able to abscond with that kind of money. So the two criteria, the two main criteria that for picking a home, one, they want to get away before somebody notices. So it's either got to be vacant, and maybe it's a second home that isn't occupied. Maybe it's a rental property that the true owners don't live there. It's just tenants that come and go. It's sort of an Airbnb. Often it's an elderly victim who, life is not as easy as it was before, and they don't have their act together as well. And somebody can come in, take command or take control of their mail, make sure they're not getting any notices and that kind of thing, and sell the property out from under them. But the other big thing is the value of the house. The higher the value, the more they can cash out easily. All right, any property owner can be a victim of home title theft. And I think you saw that in that very first one I mentioned, involving the foreclosure deeds. I mean, people often wonder, You know, if it's held in a trust or if there's no equity, am I still at risk? And the answer is absolutely yes, because it doesn't really matter what state the title is in. The bad guy, the fraudster, just needs to forge the right type of document to wipe that out. So if it's held in a trust, they'll forge a document where that trust is transferring ownership to the bad guy. By the way, I should say it's not always into the bad guy's name. The bad guy might have stolen somebody's identity that they're now controlling, so they transfer it into that person's name, or they might set up a fake company, a shell company, that they transfer ownership to that. They just need title in held in some way that they can control and move forward. But this is vacant land. We've talked about that in Hawaii and in Miami, commercial property, which was that place up in Philadelphia, single family residences, condominiums, apartment buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So really there is no, there's no type of property that is immune to this type of scam. Okay, so I think I've said a little bit of all this already. Oops. The primary targets are, as we said, vacant lands, vacant homes, poorly maintained homes, elderly homeowners. In fact, the fraudsters often, not always, but often will cruise by the home first, scoping it out, seeing if it looks like it's not well maintained, if people aren't paying attention, that kind of thing, because their goal, again, is to disappear with the money before anybody notices what has happened. All right. Now, I said it's not a new crime because underlying home title theft are these other older crimes, identity theft, forgery, and whatnot. But this nature of identity theft, home title theft, is a relatively new crime. And I kind of started handling these cases when it was pretty new. And the reason is this, before, I don't know, about 20, 25 years ago, it was very difficult to forge documents credibly, to make believable forged documents. Because we just didn't have the equipment for it. But now literally every desktop computer has the capability of producing credible, believable forged documents. Everybody has this technology at their fingertips. And as I pointed out earlier, I mean, what you can't make online, you can order online, like this fake notary stamp. Or you could make the fake notary stamp on your computer as well and make it look legitimate. So that's really what has changed. So it was about 20, 25 years ago that this transition happened. And just coincidentally, I started handling these cases really on the leading edge of it in the early 2000s. As I mentioned, the resources are available on the internet. Oh, this is an important point. I mean, it used to be that notaries had to be involved in crime. When documents needed to, fake documents needed to be made, you needed to get that notary stamp on there. But now, as I said, that can be forged. Curiously, though, a lot of these crooks, not all of them are bright. And a lot of them will still try to get notaries involved in their crimes. Now, this is why home title theft is so harmful. It's because it's so hard to unwind it. If somebody uses your credit card, you call your bank, they'll cancel that card number, and you'll get a new credit card in the mail within a couple of days. Not a big deal, not a big impact. But with home title theft, once that forged deed is filed with the county, the only option for that victim is to go into court and prove that it's fraudulent. Now, this can be relatively quick and painless. And by that, I mean, it could cost as little as about $5,000 in attorney's fees and take as little as 6 months in process. But it can also drag in. If you've ever been involved in a lawsuit of any kind, you know that lawsuits take on a life of their own. If any of the bad guys or if the title company gets involved, if anybody else gets involved, that drags this case on and extends the life of it and increases the expenses. And so I mentioned the title company. Why would the title company get involved? Well, if there's a title company that's on the hook for this loss, they don't just say, oh, okay, we accept the fraud. And they have to do their own due diligence. And part of that due diligence may be taking the true victim's deposition to make sure they weren't in on the crime. They're not, the title company can't just pay out $500,000, $1 million just, on somebody's word. They've actually got to make sure they dot their I's and cross their T's. So this process can drag on for some time, become quite expensive. In fact, during that time, until the victim gets a judgment canceling the fraudulent deed, they can't sell their home, they can't refinance their home. They're stuck. I consider this to be the worst type of identity theft because it is so difficult and expensive to reverse the damage. All right, title theft is growing more common, probably. I say probably because nobody keeps statistics on this yet. Hopefully sometime soon, somebody will be separating this out. The FBI keeps statistics generally on real estate fraud cases, but they don't separate out title theft cases from the rest. So we don't know exactly. I've done my own estimates. I've interviewed people in the title insurance industry and talked to law enforcement. And this is a very rough estimate, based on thin data. But my estimate is that there's about 10,000 known victims per year. And again, that's a rough estimate. But my friends in Los Angeles tell me that organized crime have discovered home title theft, and they use this very simple process to steal money and fund their other activities. On a news show, on a news report, I saw a Dallas prosecutor a couple of years ago say that they had, at that moment in time, they had over 90 cases they were investigating. I mentioned the 50 cases in Miami, and then for Hawaii, we've heard that it's epidemic. And title claims investigators that I've spoken to have given me, again, this is anecdotal, this is not a scientific study, but it's worth considering, have told me that anywhere between 40 and 80% of claims are fraud, based on fraud, title fraud. That's claims to the title insurance company. 40 to 80% are based on title fraud. So, this is not something small, and it's getting bigger, and it's going to get bigger before it gets worse. Because right at this point, there's not much stopping thieves from doing it, from title thieves from doing it, and more are learning how to do it. For people who are willing to take a risk of going to prison, this is a very lucrative opportunity. But how big is the risk really? I mean, one thing I've learned over the years is that investigating fraud cases, including this type of case, is very labor intensive. In fact, one detective told me, this was a long time ago, but he told me that he could close about 20 residential burglary cases in the time it takes to close just one real estate fraud case. So you can see because of that, there will never, ever be enough detectives investigating this kind of crime. So some will go to prison. In fact, this is an outlier, and I saw somebody in Texas recently got a sentence of over 60 years for a real estate fraud crime. That's very high. That's the outlier. But they can go to prison and get significant time. But most, honestly, will probably not get caught. How am I doing on time here? All right. I'm sorry, yes?
We do have a question. Shori is asking, what is your longest stretched case?
My longest case personally took 2 years. 2 years and cost $15,000. This is the kind of case I handle, so I'm able to handle it as expeditiously as possible. It only took that long because of the title company was doing their own due diligence. So, okay, so let's talk about title insurance, because people often will think that their home title insurance will cover this kind of crime, but most title insurance does not. So first of all, just briefly, what is title insurance? We have something very unique here in the United States in title insurance. In many countries, if you're buying a piece of property, as the buyer, you need to do your own due diligence to make sure that that seller truly owns the property and truly has the authority to sell it to you. Can you imagine if you had to dig through the records and figure it out and not know whether or not those documents were forged? So what we've done in this country is we've transferred that risk to title insurance companies. So we pay, if they are able to show clear title to their satisfaction, they're able to show that the seller truly has the authority to sell it to you, or to the buyer, then they will issue a policy. And what that means is if they turn out to be wrong, if there was fraud in the title history, if there was some other defect, such as an heir had been overlooked who now has an interest in the property, they will pay to cover that loss, to fix the situation. So, you know, it's kind of a really slick, smart system. That way, you know, the professionals, people who are used to looking at title, investigating title, they do it in every case that there is title insurance. All right, so there are different types of title insurance, particularly, I'm talking here about residential transactions. So there's a lender's policy. If there's a mortgage involved, the mortgage lender will always require the buyer to buy title insurance to protect their investment, their loan on the property. Typically, in most states, owners will buy a policy as well to protect their own interest should there be a defect in title. And then lastly, and what I found is that most people in the title industry don't even know about this. Well, okay, again, it wasn't a scientific survey on my part, but everybody I've talked to was unaware of this. There is a homeowners policy, which is sort of an expanded owner's policy that is offered that actually protects the buyer from fraud before and after the purchase. See, typical title insurance only protects you for fraud up until the point that you purchase the property. But there are these policies that will continue to protect the homeowner after they purchase the property. So that's the type of fraud we're talking about. After you purchase the property, many, many years after you purchase the property, if somebody forges a deed to steal your title, if you have one of these homeowners policies that covers it, then the title insurance will be on the hook. Now, just by again, twist of fate, I happened to meet the attorneys who drafted that language way back in the late 1990s. And so it has been available since around 97, 98, 99. Again, not all homeowners buy it, but it is available out there. And let me just show you the language and what that looks like for the title insurance professionals who are on the call here. Under covered risks, it lists, you look at number 3 there, someone else claims to have a right affecting your title because of forgery or impersonation. And then number 5, any of those covered risks 1 through 4 occurring after the date of policy. So that's the language there that protects homeowners as long as they own that home from title theft. But based on my non-scientific surveys, most people don't have that policy. Some might. So if they're a victim of title theft, the first thing they should do is look at their title policy and see if it has that language in there. And if so, then they should make a claim to their title insurance company, and so that they can handle this and pay for the legal fees for them. Okay, moving on. Number 9.
We do have another question from Dennis. She's asking, does a deed of trust versus mortgage state make one more susceptible? I'll just repeat.
Deed of trust versus mortgage state make one more. No, it doesn't. No, because again, it doesn't matter what has been recorded against the property. The clever criminal can file any kind of deed after that, wiping those out. It might be a foreclosure. It might be a satisfaction of mortgage, or what we call in California a reconveyance. They'll file the right kind of document in order to overcome that hurdle. Now, that doesn't eliminate the bank's right, the mortgage holder's right. I mean, they can come in and sue to get their collateral back, and that was likely to happen. But all the bad guy needs to do is to get control of the title for that period of time, a month, 2 months, whatever it takes, to sell the property or get a mortgage from a hard money lender or however they're going to cash out the money. That's all they need. They just need a short period of time, and then they're in the win. And they've laundered the money through various means so they can keep it. Okay, briefly, notaries. I'm a huge fan of notaries. I always have been. because they are truly the guardians against home title theft. I mean, think about it. What is the purpose of a notary? Their job is to verify that the person sitting in front of them is the true person who has the authority to sign that document. That's their job, right? And then once they see the person sign the document, they confirm that the signature belongs to the true person, then they put a stamp on the document. And that stamp is on there so that everybody who receives that deed or power of attorney or other important document knows that the true signer signed the document, that this document is authentic and real and not fake, and they can rely on it. And this system worked well for hundreds of years, really until the last couple of decades, when technology has enabled the fraudsters to overcome those two things, to come up with high quality fake IDs and produce forged documents that look real. But the notaries are still right there. They are still right there at the gate, trying to protect us all. They are at that point of the funnel where this whole situation can be fixed. The three basic ways home title theft is committed is by duping the notary, skipping the notary, undue influence. And I'll give you quick examples of each of those. So this is an example of duping the notary. I circled the stamp there on the notary stamp on there, and this particular notary was conned by a very slick con artist who is in prison now for the next at least another 15 years. Probably good chance he'll die in prison, but he was out there committing title theft and other real estate related crimes for decades before he finally went to prison. And he was a very smooth talking, persuasive con artist. And he found John Cardenas here, or Cardenas. And he said, John, I work with people who are in foreclosure, and I save their homes from foreclosure. And sometimes the foreclosure is imminent. It's going to happen right now. And we don't have time to get to a notary. So would you please pre-notarize or pre-stamp and pre-sign these deeds for me? And so, yeah, John pre-notarized about 100 deeds, which the bad guy then used for all of his, criminal purposes. This is kind of a funny document here because, the grantee, the grantor, the person giving away the property had no idea this was happening. Excuse me, this is a different one. Samuel Corbin, who is the grantor here, doesn't even exist. Yet somehow he signed this document, and it's the forgery of the notary's. They didn't have to forge the notary seal because of the complicity of the notary in this case. And he did lose his notary commission by the way. So, all right, skipping the notary. We've already talked about this. I showed you my fake stamp. If that was a real stamp, or we saw that example in Miami where the notary had no idea it was happening as well. That video. Here's another one. This was a power of attorney. Powers of attorney are extremely powerful. With a power of attorney, you can empty out somebody's bank account. You can buy homes in their names. This particular power of attorney was used to buy a $785,000 home in the name of this elderly couple. So it's really the key here is they've got to get around the notary somehow. Undue influence. This is a real challenge here. Undue influence. This is where maybe there's an unscrupulous caregiver. It could be, somebody who was hired and who's from an agency. It could be a relative. It could be a friend. It could be a lawyer who gets in with an elder or the person they're giving care to and tricks them into signing a deed. And that house there you're looking at right there, that's exactly what happened here. They were tricked into signing a mortgage on the property, saying that they had borrowed, $75,000. Well, they didn't. They didn't borrow the money. They never received that money. They thought they were signing some other documents, but they signed a mortgage deed, and they were tricked by a very slick con artist, basically. Once they had that mortgage deed, they've been foreclosed on the victim and were able to cash out the value of that mortgage that they never provided at all. So that's an example of undue influence. All right, now I'm wrapping up here. I've been doing this for a very long time, dealing with this crime for a very long time. I've put a lot of effort into it, thought a lot about it, and there is a way to prevent it. And the number one way is starting with the notaries. Giving them the technology they need to ensure that only the true owner can sign a deed. Ensure that their signatures and stamps cannot be forged, and to ensure that a notary stamp truly means something again, so that when that document is received by the final users, whether it's the county clerk's office, whether it's the title industry, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a buyer or seller, they can believe that it's authentic. So, the trick is to empower our guardians, the notaries, with 21st century technology. And so I just want to tell you briefly about this electronic notary journal by Veritable Data. Yeah, that's my company. It does those things. It provides advanced ID verification technology. So the notary can scan an ID and know within about 20 seconds whether it's real or fake. It stamps the document with a unique hash number, so it prevents forged notary seals. And by the way, this notary journal is free to notaries. I mean, it's out there for them to use. It's can replace in most states, it can replace their hardbound journal. The documents are stored on the blockchain so that they can easily be authenticated by title or the county clerk's office. And we protect everybody's private personal information by using Web 3.0 technology. So that's Veritable Data and Verilock.com. The last thing I want to talk about, because a lot of people are talking about this. In fact, you may have seen me on some commercials for one of the big title monitoring companies. I was asked to be their legal expert on it. Didn't get paid to do it. I did it because these title monitoring companies are doing a great job of getting the word out about title theft. I don't think there could have been enough public service announcements to get the word out there. And we can dispute whether or not we like their marketing methodologies, but this was a way to get the information out there. And I think as a direct result, of title monitoring, about 10% of the counties, by my count, now have an online title monitoring service that they offer for free to their constituents. But it is not insurance; it's just title monitoring. And to me, it's a partial solution. Frankly, I think anybody who has elderly parents, elderly friends, should be monitoring those folks' properties for them and making sure that they stay safe. And so with that, I think I'm going to wrap up here and take some questions and answers. Before I do that, let me just tell you, there's going to be a survey that we'll put in a chat box. And I hope you'll really take that, because there's just not a lot of data out there, what people think about title theft. And this will really help us understand that and help us improve future webinars. We'll also email it to you tomorrow. You'll also get a copy of these slides by email as well. So let's see, I'm going to go over to the chat box and let's see. Yeah, let's see. There's some questions here. Can you get a participation certificate? Well, we are not licensed by anybody to provide any kind of continuing education, but we could, if you email me, yeah, we can come up with some kind of certificate if that will help you. Absolutely. The replay, it'll take about a week to get it edited correctly, but we'll have the video available for you, PJ, coming soon. The journal. Yes, thanks for asking, Yvette. The journal is available at www.verilock.com. Again, it's free for notaries and can be downloaded from the App Store, the Play Store, wherever, for whichever kind of phone you have. Frank, yes, no more big book. That's right. The app does fit in your back pocket. In California, they're not allowed to use electronic notary journals, but so we have an abbreviated version that contains just the fraud prevention aspects of the journal that they could use in California. I think that's Rachel. Oh, it's abbreviated there. Is there an ID pen you recommend or have available? I don't have any expertise on ID. I'm sorry.
We do have certain questions which are unanswered. It has been asked some time back.
Okay.
Can you just scroll up a bit at around 9:53 p.m. We can start.
Okay, let me answer this
Ryan.
question. Let me ask this question. Is there a time period that someone who steals a house, like squatter rights, where if no one disputes the fraud, title transfers for X years, then, well, that will be different in various states. You know, I know California law. I know how that works in California. There are different squatters' rights in different states, and you have to ask an attorney there. Yes, we can put the URL for the electronic journal in the chat. I'm going to scroll back up to the question, but I keep getting more questions here. Is it still the case that title companies are still paying out fraud cases rather than cooperating with law enforcement and getting into the legal process? You know, it really depends on the title company. And it's not just title companies, it's financial institutions of all cases. And there are a number of reasons why sometimes they won't go to law enforcement. Sometimes it's bad PR and they make a decision not to go to law enforcement. Other times they just know that law enforcement in their area isn't prepared to handle these types of cases, and it just wouldn't be worth their while. Like I said, these cases are hard and labor intensive to investigate, and there's just a shortage of investigators who know how to do it. Okay, let me scroll up. You said, let's see.
There's a question from Ryan. Just check.
Ryan. Let's see. At what time did you say?
Yeah, just a second.
I know, Ryan.
It's 9:50.
Hope you're doing well.
9:50.
9:50?
Yeah. And
Or did you say 9:15? 1-5?
it's 9:53 to be exact. He's asking, shall I tell you the question?
I have it here.
Yeah, okay. So 9:53, we have a comment from Ryan, and then we have a question from Frank.
What's the penalty for these criminals? That's a good one. Risk versus reward. How much prison time? What is the average? Well, the average is actually lower than I think you would hope. The average is probably those who get prosecuted. The average is probably around 4 or 5 years. But there have been some outliers recently. There was, as I said earlier, there was one that got 60 years. I saw another one who got in the high 20s. Those are outliers, but perhaps they are a trend in the right direction. Historically, the sentence has been low. And honestly, that's not surprising either. The judges who sentence these folks deal day in and day out with violent crimes. And so when placed next to violent crimes, these fraud crimes may not seem as serious. So you kind of can understand why they would have the lower sentences. But the bigger sentences are necessary to deter this kind of behavior. The other thing that's necessary, by the way, is if you're involved with a case in some way, like if you work for law enforcement, please do a press release. Get the word out, so that the criminals know that they are being hunted. Use those press releases as much as possible, because you're just not going to be able to get enough of them to make a huge difference. Okay, and Ryan, never mind the fact it's fairly standard practice. The first claim just gets denied by title companies. Oh, well, okay. I don't want to be quite so cynical, Ryan, but yeah. So the thing of it is, again, very few title policies actually cover this type of fraud. Some do, and again, that should be a victim's first step, to look into look at their title insurance policy and see if they're covered. And if they're not sure if they're covered, they should talk to a lawyer or talk to somebody in the title industry to look at it and see if they are covered. All right, I'm going back down to the bottom here. Let's see. Getting fearful. Banks are required to file a SAR. Banks are required to file a SAR, a suspicious activity report, for any fraud or suspected fraud over 10,000. So it does get reported, but doesn't mean anyone on the Fed side picks the case up. Yeah, I don't know the data, but I know that the federal authorities get huge volumes of suspicious activity reports, and they do try to find patterns and find, if they can find, a ring of criminals or a string of crimes that are linked together, they can dive into those. But there's a lot of data. Let's see. I have seen news coverage on a young criminal conducting this crime from jail. I'm still in shock. All he needed was a computer. Yep, that's true. Again, I guess that's my biggest point is we need to do something about this to stop this. It's not an easy solution because laws need to be changed in 50 states. Not big changes, little changes, but they need to change so that the notaries can be brought up, their tools can be brought up to the 21st century. But really, the notaries are the solution. It all starts with them. They are literally the guardians against this, and there are solutions. Okay. What's the difference between title insurance and title monitoring? Well, title insurance is insurance. It protects you from, most title insurance policies protect you from fraud or other defects in title prior to your purchase. Basically, they are checking the title to make sure the seller has the authority to sell. Title monitoring takes place after you've purchased and make sure that you, lets you know immediately if there are any changes to your title. So they're different products, kind of the title monitoring. It's a partial solution to this problem that is offered by several companies as well as some counties out there. Let's see, Jan in Virginia, $45 to become a notary, no background, no training, no bond, nothing. Drives me nuts. Yeah, some states it's easier to become a notary than others. Do you need, last down question, do you need to add more title insurance every time you refinance? Okay, I don't work in the title industry, so I'm going to tell you what my understanding is. Typically, the homeowner will purchase their own protection only at the initial purchase, when they buy the house at the beginning. And that's when they should buy that homeowner's policy that includes protection for title. And like I said, people in the title industry that I've talked to aren't even aware that it's available. Because it's not typical, it's not historically what title insurance was. And then every time you refinance, it's my understanding that the mortgage lender will require a new title insurance policy every time you refinance in order to protect their investment in you and in your property. Sure, yeah. Why do I need title insurance? Well, as I explained earlier, title insurance is important because it shifts the burden of knowing of due diligence. It shifts the burden of due diligence away from the buyer to the title insurance company, because it's just impossible for people who don't know anything about title insurance to do their own investigation into the title history. Let the experts do it. A lot of questions about title monitoring. Frank, does title monitoring help disputing family members? I think what you're getting at is this, often there are disputes between, when there's elderly parents, often the grown children don't get along. And so the person who is the child who is taking care of the elder often feels, entitled, maybe they're morally entitled, but legally not, and that would be a great situation for the non-caregiving children to just be monitoring the title to know what's going on there. Lou, have you discussed enhanced title insurance? I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. The enhancement I know of is that I explained already is what it's called homeowners title insurance that does cover title theft after the purchase, title fraud, forgery, that type of thing after the purchase. If there's some other type of enhanced title insurance, again, I'm not in the title industry. I've learned all of this from a lawyer's perspective and prosecutor's perspective. If there's some other kind of title insurance, I'm not sure I know about. Well, sorry, I meant I have title insurance. Why do I need title monitoring? Well, the answer is because most title insurance doesn't cover title fraud after the purchase, and so title monitoring would at least notify you at the earliest possible moment that there is fraud. And you can actually take action before the damage gets too deep, too bad. Because often it's a two-step process. Often, not always, but often it's a two-step process where they transfer ownership to themselves. The bad guys transfer ownership to themselves, and then they go through the process of selling the property or getting a mortgage on it from a hard money lender, that type of thing. So title monitoring could certainly help you prevent that second step. Yes, Desi, you can always check public records on your properties. That's true. It's easy in some counties, but in my experience, that's very few counties. It's my experience, it's less than 10% of counties that make it easy to go online and check your properties. And again, these title thieves, they only need a month or at most 2 to get their money and run, maybe even less, a few days. And so unless people are checking their public records like weekly or at least monthly, it really doesn't do that much to protect them. In those counties where there's no online documents, they actually have to go into the county clerk's office to look up the documents. So it can be a real hassle. And that's why I said about 10% of counties have responded to these private home title monitoring services by developing their own home title monitoring that people can sign up for. You're welcome, Yvette. Thanks for joining us. Okay, Ryan says there are generally 3 types of policies. CLTA, this is in California, lowest form of coverage, ALTA standard, and ALTA homeowners. There are also various expanded policies and endorsements that you can purchase but are usually never told about, since here in California, the seller of the home buys the incoming purchaser's policy. I see, that's interesting. So I was told by a real estate broker in California that most California buyers do purchase the ALTA homeowners policy, which means they would be covered after for this type of theft. And so if they got the ALTA homeowners policy after 1997, 1998, 1999, they should be covered. Hi, Rosalia. Yes, if there are liens on the property, can they still get away with the fraud? Again, yes. If there it doesn't really matter the state of the property. The fraudster, it just changes what documents the fraudster needs to forge. They would need to forge something that showed that those liens were satisfied or paid off, or they would need to file documents that made it look like there was a foreclosure sale or a sheriff's auction, which wiped out the liens. It doesn't really matter what the state of the title is. It just changes what documents the fraudster has to forge and file. Thank you, Desi. All right, well, thank you for the great questions. And I hope you'll all take the time to fill out the survey. It shouldn't take you more than about 2 or 3 minutes. It's 15 quick questions, and it'll be very helpful to us. Hope you all have a great day.